Hey YouTube, we're back for the assembly of this iPhone 4 that I disassembled the LCD from. I have my new one here on the table. You can see it's got the new red plastic and some adhesive tape I'm going to reapply to the iPhone. You can see this nice and not shattered like the last one that we were using. Go ahead and peel off the backing of this LCD screen, get it nice and shiny here. We're going to go ahead and put the adhesive on. You'll see a lot of people not use new adhesive when you put an LCD back onto these iPhones in a lot of the videos that you watch. And I really prefer to do so, as I think it makes the phone a little bit stiffer. And to be honest with you, I spend a lot of time taking this phone apart and putting the LCD back on. I want to make sure that it's done right. So you want to make sure you line up all the holes at the top here. Make sure we're not covering up the front-facing camera. So make sure that the cutouts are lined up and you're not covering up anything that's really important. You can move the adhesive around a little bit once it's on. It's kind of almost like a gel, a little bit more rubber adhesive, so you can kind of push it and apply it in the places that you want it to be until you get it exactly where it should be on the phone. Now, if it is a little too big, you can always cut it to fit with maybe an X-Acto knife as well. Something that I do on a lot of Samsung phones is cut to fit 3M tape. But this phone came with some pre-cut stuff that works pretty well. On this bottom portion here, make sure you're not covering up these two front sensors, and the home button ribbon cable extends across here, which is the longer cutout on this little piece of adhesive here. Make sure you're not covering that up as you're putting this on. Make sure you actually follow the cutout portions. Push it down a little bit and make sure that it's on there nice and well before I start trying to pry it off. I like to use a pair of tweezers to help me pull this up. Make sure to rub it down on the edge that you're pulling up so you get a nice even lift off. You want to make sure that the phone portion here is nice and level before you apply the adhesive as well. If you have any old residue when you first remove the LCD, make sure you scrape off all the old adhesive. That way you seat the new LCD screen nice and flush when we're reinstalling it, that we don't run into any hiccups as we go. Try to find an edge here that's put down nice and well that I can pull the sticker up with. Alright, so we got our adhesive on here, and we're going to go ahead and put our LCD on. This flex cable at the top, you want to make sure you kind of bend it just a little bit. That way it goes into the slot at the top of the phone easier. So these two LCD ribbons need to go through this slot right here at the top. Make sure they pull all the way through before you push the top of the phone and the LCD together. You don't want to bend this ribbon cable. It is a little bit stiffer. It does have like a kind of a chip on the top of the cable, so make sure you pull it through and kind of use that to help you pull the phone together. Now down here at the bottom, the home button usually gives me a little bit of trouble, so you want to have a nice slim tool, maybe a pin. I'll just use my opening tool to push the home button back into place, shake it a little bit, and you can kind of almost hear the LCD kind of click on. And when you've done that, you know that it's time to go ahead and flip it over and get it set. Always check the home button before you start reassembling. Make sure that's pressing and that everything feels good. Try to get the phone LCD nice and level. Once you've done that, we're going to go ahead and reassemble the phone using the screws. The first thing that we're going to do is put the the 3 screws at the bottom here, the washers. To be honest with you, I find this to be the hardest part of this entire thing, is putting these on. The easiest way for me is to put the washer on to the kind of the raised screw port first. Use a pair of tweezers here to kind of push it into place. Unfortunately, it looks like my tweezers somehow got magnetized in my bag of tools, so we'll not be using that apparently. Once you get it nice and seated, it'll kind of stay on there pretty well. You can lay the phone down and seat the screw onto the top of the bit, and make sure that you get a nice straight angle at it, and that will help you screw it back into place. This is probably the most tedious portion. I don't like to tighten the screws down completely yet. What I want to do is get them all in first, even the four that go in the side. And then what I do is push down and tighten the screws to make sure that my LCD is seated nice and flush to the phone. Put in our second screw here with the washer. Now you got to make sure that you use the washers. If not, you won't get a snug fit on the LCD on the sides, and it'll kind of bow out, and you'll see a gap in between the mid-frame and the LCD. So this is a pretty important part of your reinstall to make sure that it looks professional and factory fit. This is something that needs to be done. Sometimes they give you a little bit of trouble. The important thing is here not to get really angry, to keep your cool, because it seems like only things get worse once you start getting a little stressed out. Another thing that I've done in the past to try to make them stick is I will kind of put a little bit, I'll lick the washer to see if it'll stick to the phone. If I get a little frustrated, that gives it a little extra sticking power, so I can get it into the screw port. Start on the other side. Alright. I'm telling you, these washers are probably one of the most difficult things on this entire phone. I don't know why they're so hard for me to do, but I'm telling you, make sure you have patience for this portion. Almost done with these 6 side screws with washers. Alright, we'll start putting in the corner screws here. These are a little bit smaller than the side screws, so make sure you don't get them confused. These ones are a little bit easier, a little bit more room to work with, and no washers. I always have a problem with the top one that has all of the connectors by it. So there's such a tight space, it is a little bit hard to get to. This is the tricky one right here. To be honest with you, a slimmer screwdriver works a little bit better. When you buy an LCD, you usually get a lot of tools with it. I think this one cost me, it was like 25 bucks, and it came with things like a guitar pick and a plastic puller, and a few of the smaller screwdrivers with just the flat black sides. Now I don't really like to use those too much, as I find it's a little bit easier to strip out the screws and get a lot of leverage. So I like to use this iFixit one that I have. But in this particular case right here, it's probably best to use something that's a little bit more narrow if you haven't removed the remaining connectors here. And I'll actually switch to that screwdriver here in just a few seconds to give myself a little bit easier time. But I am stubborn, and I like to see if I can make it work. A couple of expletives. Searching for that screwdriver. Here we go. This is the screwdriver that I'm talking about. You can get a little bit better angle at the screw slot here using this one than something that's a little bit thicker. There we go. Alright, now that we've got them in there, they're still a little bit loose, and we're going to go through and tighten them all up. I like to press down as I go through each screw and make sure that I get a lot of nice tight, you don't want to strip it out, get it nice and snug. It does have adhesive on the sides, but push down on the mid frame and the LCD, or kind of that bezel portion of the new phone, the LCD we put in. Make sure there's no gaps or lines on the phone. That really messes up a replacement and can damage your LCD. Alright, let's go through each one and get them nice and snug. Here we go. Man, I'm just not having luck. One of my studio lights just went out. Oh, there we go. I paused it and replaced it here real quick. So I don't remember what screw I was on. So let's go through and check these ones here real quick and make sure that I got them nice and snug. Alright, there we go. Last one on the sides of the LCD. And we're going to do the ones here in the top. Once you get this screw in, you can use a little bit thicker screwdriver to get a little more force and leverage. That way you don't strip it out when you're snugging it down. Push this one in and get it snug, and then we'll check the LCD and the bezel to make sure that it's nice and flush. You can see that there's no lines, no gaps between the LCD and the mid-body of the phone. We can go ahead and start our reassembly of the phone now. We're going to start with putting in our vibrator module here. Make sure you line the top screw port up with the standoff on this mid phone. That's a very important part. I debated putting the screw in, and then I realized, oh, hey, my logic board's not in yet. The next thing we're going to do is put the speaker assembly in here at the bottom. Now remember, it has these kind of 4 connectors here that need to ground off to the bottom of the phone. I didn't get it perfect here. So make sure you put them in and it slides into place. Alright, now that that is done, we're going to go ahead and put the 2 screws in. This side that I'm putting in is just a regular screw, and on the other side the screw has a little black corner triangle piece that it came with. You can see right here in my hand. It's got this little plastic on it. So make sure you put it in flat side to the inside of the phone, kind of the longer side of the triangle. This one can be a little bit tricky sometimes. Alright. we're going to go ahead and put the logic board in. Now it does kind of have a little slot at the top. You see the longer portion at the top of the board. We're going to slide it in, and it'll kind of slide right into place. Pull these ribbon cables back. Make sure they're not caught underneath the logic board, and then one just slipped underneath again. So pull these cables back. This one's a little bit thick. You can push down to make sure your cable can get in there. So slide your finger in, get it nice and flat. Alright, here we go. Make sure that it's seated nicely into the interior here. My cable came back out. There we go. It does take a little bit of finagling and work to get it right into the right spot. You'll see that all the screw ports will line up. It will want to kind of slide up at the bottom portion because of the ribbon cable. The first thing that we're going to do is put our little brass connector on at the top corner here. This is the one for actually we're going to put the one at the bottom kind of corner in here, the standoff screw, the longer one that I took out at the beginning, and we're using a flathead screwdriver to put this back in. I'm going to put the two remaining standoff screws that go down the side. And what I mean by standoff screw is really it's a screw that has another screw port on top of it, and its purpose is to lift something off of the logic board. So you can screw something into it, but it won't touch what's underneath it. And that would be a standoff screw. Now I don't like to speed my videos up. I don't want to skip anything that shows you guys that what can be a little bit tricky. I don't like to make jobs seem easier than they are. So I'm sorry if this video is a little bit longer, but I want to show you kind of the struggles of doing this. Make sure that you're comfortable doing it yourself. Put in the standoff screw down here at the bottom. And sometimes they're a little picky, and they're a little bit easier to kind of get started if you just put them in their slot. Apparently not. These screws are easier to put back in if you have a really flat Phillips screwdriver. I unfortunately do not. I'm going to change my bit to a Phillips bit just to see if I can get a little bit easier time putting it in, just to get it started. There we go. Now that I got it started, we'll go ahead and snug it up with the flat tip blade. Alright. Now that the logic board is nice and in and snug, we're going to put in this bottom screw down here by the vibration module. antenna back on here, it does slide into a connector, so make sure that you put it into its holder. And then when you're pushing it on, make sure that you use a gentle force. You don't want to bend this. If it doesn't snap on pretty easily, that means that it's not seated correctly, and you need to move it around just a little bit more. Alright, we're going to go ahead and put down some of these ribbon cables here. Get them out of the way so they stop popping up. These can be a little tricky as well. You don't want to give them a lot of force as the connector is very small. So try to get it as seated as possible, and then put a gentle force with your fingers onto it, and you'll feel it snap into place as well. If it does not, try to reseat it and then push it down just a little bit harder. Alright, so we're going to put in this brass connector, kind of the ground for the camera here at the top. It has two prongs on it that'll face outwards and would actually touch the square camera portion. And the top brass part where the screw part is actually kind of a cutout on the logic board for how it fits in. So it's not too hard to reinsert. These do have specific screws as well for each one of these. They're a little bit smaller, so make sure you're using the correct one. Here is our ground connector. There is a ground port, so you want to make sure you put it into the slots and it sits flush. Kind of push it with your finger or maybe some tweezers, help guide it into the right spot. And we'll put our screw in for this one as well. I forgot to put the connector down that this actually covers. So make sure you put this kind of the antenna connector back on beforehand. The point of this is that it gets contact above it and kind of covers it up a little bit. We'll put our ground connector back in and do it right this time. And we're going to put our last little brass connector down here that covers the antenna at the bottom near the vibration module. Now we're going to go ahead and seat the two LCD ribbon cables here. Now this first one I'm putting down does get a little bit tricky as it is a little bit thicker. You want to kind of bend it over and then push it back. And before you do that, make sure you put the camera in. We'll put this little paper back over the screw that was here at the top. I figure everything in this phone has this purpose, so make sure you put it back in the way it is. Alright, we're going to put our camera in, and then we'll put our ribbon cable down. You can see that the camera has kind of an arm that comes off it that goes underneath the cables for the LCD. That's why you want to put the camera in first. It does have a connector that you want to depress back onto it. Like I was saying, these can be tricky, and I find that usually when I'm pushing them down, it's because, and they're not going in, it's because they're too far forward. So what I'll usually do is depress it, pull back, put my finger on the front of it, and then push it back just a little bit, and it will connect back on. Like I was saying, make sure that you are gentle with these. You do not want to damage these. These are all very important cables. We'll put our round cable down. It is a little bit sticky here at the middle, so make sure you try to stick that tape back down. We're almost finished with this phone. We only have a couple more things to do. Just put the shields back on and the battery back in. So we'll put our shield on for this one first. It just has 2 Phillips screws that will hold this down. Here's our second. Kind of checking those connectors, make sure they're all nice and snug before I put the EMI shield back on. Alright, here we go. Now this is going to be a little bit tricky. It slides into the bottom here, and it does have a kind of a little hook that goes kind of beneath a ribbon cable that runs up the side of the phone here. The bigger screw goes on the outside, so we'll put that one in first. We have 3 more screws to go here. Alright. Excellent. Both of our shields back on, so we just need to put back in our battery. Pull our pull string up and make sure that you put the connector portion towards the bottom where it needs to fit in. And get that nice and snug. And there is one last screw that goes into the back of this phone to hold the battery down. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and just power the phone on real quick. And see, there's our Apple logo, so we can tell that the screen, it looks like it's functioning here. Normally that's a good sign. We'll go ahead and put our back panel back on. Make sure everything is in and snug. And then put it kind of to the top, slide it down to get it into place. And then we will put our 2 star screws that hold the back panel on for this phone. One on the left and one on the right. And then we are finished with this phone. And our assembly is finished. Now I do have a few other videos coming out, how to replace a power button on an iPhone 5 and a 3.5mm jack on an iPhone 5 as well. So if you like my videos, if they find them helpful, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the comments or let me know. Go ahead and like the video, subscribe to me if you want to see any upcomings. I plan on doing some tablets and maybe some Loca options here as well. Now you can see that the screen's back on. We're going to swipe here, make sure everything's functioning properly. And it looks like it is. Perfect. That's how you replace an LCD on an iPhone 4. Thanks for watching, you guys, and I'll see you next time.